Hello everyone, my name is Alisa and this is my reflective vlog for assessment number 2 in creative workshopping for education and community settings. So over 3 sessions in April, I delivered a series of choir workshops to a 12-member choir based in UK. The aim was to introduce them to a traditional Albanian two-voice song, working through pronunciation, harmony, and dynamic expression. In this vlog, I want to reflect honestly on what happened, not just what went well, but what didn't go to plan, what I learned from those moments, and how I would approach differently in the future. Planning best reality. When I was designing these workshops, I felt quite confident about the structure. Each session had clear objectives, a logical progression, and was grounded in learning theories I genuinely believe in, such as Vygotsky's social constructivism, Bruner's scaffolding, and Gordon's music learning theory. The plan looked good on paper, but walking into that rehearsal space, I quickly realized that real world workshop delivery is a very different thing from what you write in a lesson plan. Now, the first thing that I had to adapt was the warm up. In my plan, I had allocated 5 minutes in the start of each session for physical and vocal warm ups, such as breathing exercises, stretching, humming, and open vowels. However, when I arrived, I realized that taking time for warm ups would cut into the very limited time that I had with the choir. That's why I asked the choir leader to do the warm ups before I started my workshop delivery for the second and the third workshop. On the first one, I didn't do any because we were working only on pronunciation of the lyrics, and I didn't want to put more pressure onto the choir. This thing made me reflect on the communication, because if I had planned this in advance with the choir leader when I did also the workshop plans, it would have felt less like an improvised decision and more like a deliberate collaborative choice. Session 1: Pronunciation without singing. The first session was focused on Albanian pronunciation and lyric understanding. My plan included a progression from speaking the lyrics to actually singing a little bit of melody by the end. That final singing stage did not happen. We spent the entire session on pronunciation alone, and honestly, looking back, I think that was the right call, even though it was not something that I had written down on the plan. The singers had never encountered Albanian before, and the language has sounds that are genuinely unfamiliar to English speakers. When I started introducing the vowels and consonants, I could see that people needed more time than I had anticipated in the beginning. I slowed down, I repeated things, I used a lot of modeling, which aligns with Bandura's social learning theory, where learners benefit from observing and demonstration before attempting something themselves. The choir responded really well to this, as you can see that there was a lot of laughter, a lot of genuine effort, and a lovely atmosphere of people trying something completely new together. But reaching the singing stage was simply not realistic in that first session. What I took from this is that timing in workshop planning needs to account for the unexpected, especially when you are introducing participants to something as familiar as a new language. Now, Bruno's idea of scaffolding really resonated with me here in practice, because you cannot rush a learner to the next level of the scaffold if the foundation is not yet solid. Letting go of the plan and responding to where the group actually was felt more realistic and more respectful to the learners than pushing ahead. Session 2: Harmony and the Sheet Music Challenge. The second session introduced two voice harmony. One of the things I had assumed was that all the choir members would be able to use the music sheets I had prepared. Now, before doing the workshop plans, I had talked with the leader of the choir, and I was made known that not everyone was musically literate in the way that I was expecting, but still I handed them printed score that maybe created a little bit more confusion than support for some of them. But this was also a significant moment for me as a facilitator, because I had to pivot completely. Instead of referring to the score, I relied almost entirely on call and response in listening exercises and modeling by ear. Gordon's learning theory actually became much more central to my practice than I had originally planned and anticipated. Now, the idea that musical understanding develops through audition, through internal hearing, and processing music was exactly what I was drawing on when I asked singers to hum their part while listening to the other voice. We did not need the music sheet to do that. In fact, removing that barrier seemed to make the group more relaxed and more musically responsive. This experience made me think about assumptions. When planning workshops for community settings, it is so important to not assume a level of musical literacy that may not be there. In the future, I would design my materials with the least experienced participants in mind and treat Music Sheet as an optional support rather than a central resource. Now, the other thing about the musical sheet is that the rhythmic pattern that I was working on with them was a very difficult rhythmic pattern, 7/8, and the music sheet was in a way there to guide them about that rhythmic pattern. So, in the same time, I provided some blank sheets and pens for them to draw the amount of notes so they can tap on the rhythmic that pattern that we were working on. I think that helped because it was made clear also what rhythm I had in mind and what rhythm the music sheet was about. And I think that visualization of the rhythmic pattern really helped them to pull this off. So, one of the most challenging aspects of this entire workshop series was the inconsistent attendance of the participants. My original plan assumed a stable group of 12 singers across all three sessions. That is not what happened. Some participants came to the first and second workshops, but not on the third. Others appeared in only one session, and by the final workshop, the group I was working was a little bit more different from the one that I had started in the beginning. Now, this created real difficulties in terms of continuity because the progressive structure I had designed, where every session built directly onto the last, depended on everyone having shared the same experience in their journey of learning. Now, when new people arrived in the session, two or three, who had missed the earlier work, I had to find ways to bring them in without losing the others or going back to the very beginning. Here, the Vygotsky concept of the zone of proximal development is helpful in reflection. Different learners were at genuinely different stages, and supporting them within one ensemble setting required constant adjustment. Practically, what I did was that I paired those people together, like in those two groups that I had, and while I was working with one of the groups, I told the other group to catch up with each other, even though in the beginning of each session I repeated the whole things that we did last time. Now, the problem that arose was that if they missed the first session, the one that was about the pronunciation, they were having problem with the pronunciation. So just trying to make them constantly sing that, and I repeated the lyrics and I repeated the musical and rhythmic part of that before starting, like bringing the piece together, was what I did and what I tried to do to achieve that continuity of the workshops together. But I didn't plan for that. It was more a decision on the spot, and it would have been nice if I had a short catch up activity at the start of each session in mind, and not something that it came up during the time that I was doing the workshops. Session 3, Dynamics and what we achieved. The third session was focused on musical expression through dynamics. This was perhaps the session where I felt most in my stride as a facilitator. The group who were there, even if not everyone from the beginning, had at this point developed a real connection with the song. There was this genuine love for the song and for learning this song. And I think that really helped with the dynamics markings for this score. Now, on the first and the second session, I did not put any dynamics markings in the score. I just put it on the third one, and I explained to them the history, and I explained to them the lyrics translation on the first session, but I didn't do anything with dynamics in those sessions as to not overwhelm them. Now they know the story, they know the translation, they know the lyrics, and now we are just putting the dynamics in the score. Eliot's praxial philosophy of music education was very present for me in this session because the idea that musical understanding comes through doing, through active participation, resonates deeply with what I observed. When the choir experienced the effect of this dynamics, when I was modeling them for them to sing after, I think there was no need for a theoretical explanation, and even though they had the theoretical explanation, still the doing of it could not have been achieved only with that. So they needed that modeling, they needed that explanation about the history behind the song, and they needed to hear what that song needs to be. So why there is a piano there, why there is a crescendo, and why there is a forte in the song, and how to achieve that, and in what way the song should be sang. Now, even though we did like the most of the song, and they struggled maybe a little bit with that, we didn't finish the whole song. This was something that waited on me at the time, and I want to be honest about it. My original ambition was for the choir to perform the Albanian song in total by the end of the third workshop. We completed maybe two of the third of the song. Part of this was the language barrier, part of it was the music sheet issue, and part of it was maybe the attendance. But now when I reflect more deeply, I also think that I underestimated the complexity of what I was asking this group to do. Learning a song in a completely unfamiliar language in a two-voice structure with expressive dynamics in a 3 session of 30 to 40 minutes, and also with people that are not musically literate, that is a little bit ambitious. What the choir achieved was still significant, and I should not measure the success of these workshops only against the endpoint I had imagined. Conclusion. Reflecting on this experience as a whole, what strikes me the most is that the gap between planning and delivery is not a failure. It is where the real learning happens for the facilitator as much as the participants. I went in with a structured plan, grounded in theory, and I left with a much deeper understanding of what it means to respond to a group in the moment. I learned that community settings require flexibility and a willingness to let go of the plan when the room tells you something different. I learned not to make assumptions about musical literacy, language familiarity, or attendance. And I learned that the workshop can be meaningful and valuable even when it does not reach the destination you had in mind at the start. The singers engaged, they tried something new, they supported each other, and that ultimately is what these workshops were for. On the following video, you can hear the performance of the song that we worked on during these 3 workshops. Enjoy and thank you.
Vital